name is Geoff Hunnicutt, and I'm a teacher in the history department here at Jesuit High School, and I've been here since the fall of 1994, so this is my 31st year at Jesuit. I had resigned my commission in the Army, and I resigned because I wanted to teach high school. I did my student teaching at Benson Tech, and I had a great experience there, and then finished in the spring of '93, and then I needed to find a job. And so I just looked in the newspaper, and there was an ad in the Oregonian for teaching positions at Jesuit High School. And I didn't know what a Jesuit was. I'd never heard of the Jesuits, right? And I went to big public schools my entire life. And so I read about the school, and I applied, and I'd never had a job interview in my entire life. I was 34 years old. I'd never had a job interview. I'd been in the Army for 15 years. And I still remember that Jim Perkin was the administrator on the interview, and Larry Robinson was the department chair. It was a history position. And Jackie Schuster and Jerry Hahn were the rest of the committee. And so they just started firing all these questions at me. And I hit it off. I mean, I remember telling jokes with Larry Robinson. There's just a connection there. Jim Perkin, I don't think, was sold on me, but everybody else got along really well. And I called and I spoke to Dick Gedrose on the phone, and because I wanted to make sure they weren't trying to contact me and they couldn't find me, because I was really interested in the job. And I remember Dick saying, "We are really interested in Geoff Hunnicutt." I thought I took that as a good sign. And so when we came back, they contacted me, and then I came in and met Dick, and they offered me the job and everything. And I remember talking to Larry about it several years later, because Larry and I shared the classroom for several years. And I asked him about it. He says, "Well, how did I come across that interview?" He said, you were really good. You were really good. There was another guy, but he was way better than you. And I think that other guy might have been Scott Powers. I didn't know, because Scott was hired too. But I got the full-time gig. I tell Scott this all the time. I got the full-time gig. He got the part-time gig, You really were just sort of mentored. And I was mentored by Mike Simons, who'd been here 5 years, and Larry. And I shared the room, Larry. That was kind of my home base in Larry's room. And he was, this masterful teacher, so a wonderful guy to learn from. So I pretty much copied what Larry did, and with Mike's help. And so the transition was easy. The place was a lot smaller then. We probably had about 800 students my first year. And I taught freshmen and juniors. And the freshman class was split evenly, boys and girls. And then the junior class was heavy on boys because the girls were transfers, right? And then the senior class hardly had any girls, really. They were just the second group of girls. And I got talked into coaching basketball. I felt obligated. I had no experience as a coach. I was a terrible coach, but I got to know the students in a way that really helped me in terms of seeing them outside of class and things like that. And I also learned that I probably shouldn't be a coach. Coaching was not my thing, which is an important lesson to learn. The last few years, I've volunteered to do nights. And I've met other people doing nights, like David Lee and Raphael. I've got to know them really good this year at nights, and I never would have known them because they're over in the science department. Right? The key thing is just not to get too siloed, and that's the difficult thing, And I was talking to John Andreas, and we were talking about the student-faculty basketball game, and it used to be kind of a required thing. And I totally realized that some kids aren't into that, right? But when Gregory Lum hit that shot, it was like this collective thing that was fantastic, And so I don't want to lose some of that. As I close my career here, I feel very fortunate. I wasn't, too sure if this was the right fit for me, but it turned out to be just a wonderful fit. I mean, it just really connected to the place, where I never thought about leaving or doing anything else except teaching here. And I remember in high school, telling people when I was in high school, I want to be a teacher in high school. And then I got into the Army, and I spent 15 years in the Army. And I remember telling people, I'm going to teach high school. That's kind of weird. I'd really like to teach high school. And so I got out of the Army when I was 32, and I spent over 15 years, and since spent half my life in the Army. And I had no idea that I would come here, and I'm 65 now, and this is my 31st year. I spent nearly half my life here at Jesuit High School. And so what I'm certain of is whatever I do next, it won't be half my life doing it. Sure of that. But I've just had a wonderful experience here, and you think back and how things turned out, and how fortunate I was to the people I've met, and the experiences I've had, and I just really, I'm very grateful, and it's kind of the small graces that you receive from people, when you're having trouble or something like that, or having difficulty. That's what you really appreciate. That's what you remember. And it's why I was thinking back on stuff that I've experienced here. You're really grateful for things like that. And so, yeah, it's going to be hard. I was Brian Butcher and Daryl Feedback were coming out of the science department. I was leaving the parking lot yesterday, a couple of days ago, and they were goofing around with me. They were trying to jump in front of my car, and I was trying to hit them. And I rolled the window and I was talking to them, and they were telling me, "Oh, you counting the days?" And I said 67. and then Brian was like, "Well, it's a little bittersweet, isn't it?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it is. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because it becomes part of your identity, And I think I'm going to have a little trouble when that ends, And when I left the Army, I loved the Army. And it was difficult to leave the Army because it was a big part of my identity, and I just went cold turkey. I could have gotten back in after 9/11, but I didn't, and I just went cold turkey. And I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I went cold turkey. I think it's going to be hard for me to do that here at Jesuit, because you reach a point where you need to turn it over to the next generation. And there's I have so many colleagues now here that I've known for so long. I guess that's my message to them, is don't be afraid to let it go and to turn it over to somebody else, and it's going to be fine. There's always this underlying idea that this next generation doesn't appreciate what we've done and what we've built, and they don't understand that and that's just natural. That's just the way it is, And the Army was like that. The Army was like that, because you're constantly moving, and someone will leave. I don't know how we're going to replace you. And what you learn in the Army is the next guy who comes in, probably going to be better. Just as good, maybe better. And so that's one of the things you have to tell yourself is it's time for me to go and bring in someone who is younger and more connected to what's happening, and will connect better to students, because they do. Younger people will connect better to the students. They just do. And it's time for me to go, and you have to realize that. All right. So the school's been really good. They've done an excellent job with me, like saying you don't have to go. If you want to stay, that's fine, and I really appreciate that too, on so many levels. But I'm done. It's time to go.
Geoff, thank you very much.
Yeah. All right.
Well done.
Thanks.